I'm Sienna, 29 years old, watching the dust trail of my family's car disappear into the shimmering desert heat. 6 months pregnant, abandoned in the scorching wilderness with only a small water bottle. Take a nice walk and relax, my sister Jessica laughed as they drove away. It'll be good exercise. I never imagined my own family could be so cruel, but they had no idea what was coming. Hours later, when they turned on the TV, their faces would tell a different story. Before I continue this unbelievable story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like and subscribe button to find out how a pregnant woman survived the desert and what happened when my family saw themselves on the breaking news. Growing up in the Palmer household was never easy, especially for me. My parents, Richard and Diana Palmer, had always been controlling with rigid expectations for their daughters. My sister Jessica, 2 years younger, somehow always managed to meet their impossibly high standards. Me, I was the disappointment, the one who asked too many questions, who dreamed beyond the life they had planned. Our suburban Connecticut home looked perfect from the outside. Manicured lawn, pristine white fence, and family photos displaying forced smiles. But inside those walls, a constant tension brewed. My father, a successful corporate lawyer, demanded perfection in everything from grades to appearance. My mother, a former beauty pageant winner turned socialite, was obsessed with maintaining our family image in the community. Sienna, straighten your back, fix your hair, became the soundtrack of my childhood. Meanwhile, Jessica received praise for her ballet trophies and straight A's. I found solace in books and nature, spending hours photographing birds and landscapes whenever I could escape the house. When college application time came, I fought my first real battle. My parents had my life mapped out. The right Ivy League school, the right sorority, the right husband from the right family. But I had discovered my passion for wildlife photography and environmental journalism. Photography. That's a hobby, not a career. My father dismissed pushing brochures for law schools across the dining table. All that time in the wilderness will ruin your skin, my mother added, as if that was what mattered most. The arguments escalated until I made a decision that changed everything. I applied secretly to the University of Arizona's environmental journalism program and won a partial scholarship. The night I announced my decision, dinner plates crashed to the floor as my father swept the table clean in anger. "If you choose this path, don't expect our financial support," he threatened. Jessica watched silently from the staircase, a mixture of shock and something else in her eyes, perhaps the first seeds of the jealousy that would later grow into something dangerous. I left home that fall with 2 suitcases and determination. The financial struggle was real, working 3 part-time jobs while maintaining my studies. But for the first time, I felt free, breathing desert air unfiltered by my parents' expectations. It was during my sophomore year that I met Jackson Martinez in an environmental ethics class. Unlike the polished, privileged boys my parents had always pushed toward me, Jackson came from a working-class New Mexico family. His father was a park ranger, his mother a nurse. He was studying hydrology, passionate about water conservation in desert communities. Our connection was instant and deep. We shared the same values, the same love for the natural world, the same drive to make a difference. After class discussions, we would hike into the desert, where Jackson taught me about the surprising resilience of desert ecosystems, while I photographed the subtle beauty most people missed. My parents were predictably horrified when they learned about Jackson through social media photos I had forgotten to restrict. A park ranger's son. What kind of future could he possibly provide? My mother questioned during one of our increasingly rare phone calls. These ethnic boys might seem exciting now, Sienna, but think about your future. My father added, not even trying to disguise his prejudice against Jackson's Hispanic heritage. Their disapproval only strengthened my resolve. After graduation, Jackson and I both found jobs in Tucson, me as a freelance environmental photographer working with conservation organizations, him with the State Water Resource Department. We moved into a modest apartment filled with plants and photographs, building the life we wanted. My career took an unexpected turn when National Geographic published one of my desert photo series, launching me into more prestigious assignments. Suddenly, my hobby was paying more than my parents had ever thought possible. The success should have healed our relationship, but instead it seemed to deepen the rift. My independence was an affront to their control. Jessica, meanwhile, had followed the approved path. Ivy League education engagement to the son of one of my father's law partners, and a position at my father's firm. Yet during our rare family gatherings, I caught her watching me with a strange expression. Not quite hatred, but something unsettling. Everything changed again when I discovered I was pregnant. Jackson and I hadn't planned it, but the news filled us with joy. He proposed the same night, not with an expensive diamond, but with his grandmother's turquoise ring under a desert sunset. When I called my parents to share both pieces of news, the silence on the other end of the line was deafening. "Pregnant before marriage," my mother finally said, "and now marrying into that family." "We're concerned about your judgment, Sienna," my father added coldly. "This isn't how we raised you." Jessica, however, surprised me by reaching out the next day. "They'll come around," she assured me over the phone. "Let's plan a family trip to Arizona. They need to meet Jackson properly, see your life there. I'll convince them." I was hesitant but hopeful. Maybe this baby could heal our family wounds. Maybe my sister was genuinely trying to help. When my parents agreed to visit Arizona for a week, staying at a luxury desert resort not far from our apartment, I allowed myself to believe reconciliation was possible. How terribly wrong I was. The morning of what would become the worst day of my life dawned bright and clear. June in the Sonoran Desert means intense dry heat, but the resort my parents had chosen offered an oasis of luxury with its flowing fountains and climate-controlled environments. I was 6 months pregnant, my baby bump clearly visible under my maternity dress, as I walked into the resort restaurant for breakfast. My parents were already seated, my mother sipping fresh-pressed juice while my father reviewed emails on his phone. Jessica was buttering toast, looking impeccable in designer resort wear. Jackson had stayed behind at our apartment. He had an early meeting at work, but planned to join us for dinner that evening. "Good morning," I said, trying to keep my voice bright despite the tension that seemed to follow my family everywhere. My mother eyed my belly before responding. "You're looking healthy." I bit back a retort and took my seat. The waiter poured water into my glass, and I thanked him with a genuine smile that seemed to highlight the artificial nature of my family's pleasantries. "We thought we'd take a special drive today," my father announced, finally putting down his phone. "There's a particular landscape view about an hour from here that's supposed to be spectacular. Good for your photography, perhaps." "That sounds wonderful," I said, genuinely pleased. Perhaps they were making an effort after all. Jessica nodded enthusiastically. "I researched it. It's not on the typical tourist path, more authentic desert experience." Looking back, I should have noticed the strange glance that passed between my sister and parents. I should have questioned why they suddenly showed interest in my photography. I should have asked more about this mysterious location. But I was so desperate for their approval, for some sign that they might accept my baby, my fiancé, my life choices, that I ignored my instincts. After breakfast, we piled into the luxury SUV my father had rented. I texted Jackson our plans, letting him know I'd be back by late afternoon. He sent back a heart emoji and "Have fun, love you both," meaning me and the baby. The simple text message filled me with warmth. If only I had known it would be my lifeline later. My father drove while my mother navigated, directing us away from Tucson and deeper into the desert. The roads gradually became less traveled, transitioning from highway to secondary road to unpaved track. The air conditioning blasted against the rising external heat. "Are you sure about this route?" I asked after nearly an hour, when the last signs of civilization had disappeared behind us. "This is pretty remote territory." "That's the point, dear," my mother replied without turning around. "Authentic desert experience, like your sister said." The car stopped at what appeared to be a viewpoint of sorts, though there was no marker, no parking area, just the end of a dirt road surrounded by desert wilderness stretching to distant mountains. "We're here," my father announced, turning off the engine. "Where exactly is here?" I asked, looking around at the empty landscape. Beautiful, yes, but utterly isolated. "Why don't you get out and take some pictures?" Jessica suggested, her voice carrying an edge I couldn't quite identify. "The light is perfect right now." Still trusting, still hoping, I stepped out of the air-conditioned vehicle into the wall of heat. The temperature must have been well over 100 degrees. I reached back for my camera bag, but Jessica handed me just my water bottle instead. "You won't need that," she said. "Just enjoy the moment for once without hiding behind your lens." I took a few steps from the car, surveying the landscape. It was beautiful in its harsh way. Saguaro cacti standing like ancient sentinels, rocky formations casting sharp shadows, the distant shimmer of heat creating mirage like distortions on the horizon. I turned to comment on the view. That's when I heard the car doors lock. My father had already restarted the engine. Through the tinted windows, I could see three faces watching me. My father's grim determination, my mother's averted gaze, and Jessica's smile. The passenger window lowered just enough for Jessica's voice to carry out to me. "Take a nice walk and relax. It'll be good exercise." "What are you doing?" I screamed, rushing toward the vehicle, one hand protectively covering my pregnant belly. "This isn't funny. This is for your own good, Sienna," my father called through the driver's window. "Time to think about the choices you've made." "You can't be serious." I slammed my palms against the window. "I'm pregnant. You can't leave me out here." "You love the desert so much," Jessica said, her voice dripping with resentment. "Now you can commune with nature all you want." "We'll be back in a few hours," my mother added, finally looking at me. "Consider this an intervention. You need to understand the consequences of your decisions." Before I could respond, the car began to move, kicking up dust that choked my protests. I ran after it as best I could in my conditions, screaming, begging them to stop this madness. "It'll be good exercise," Jessica's voice called back, fading as the SUV picked up speed down the dirt road. I stood in shock, watching the dust trail slowly settle, the sound of the engine disappearing into the vast silence of the desert. Surely this was just a cruel joke. Surely they wouldn't actually leave their pregnant daughter alone in one of the most hostile environments on Earth. But as minutes ticked by and the reality of my situation sank in, I realized the truth. My family had actually abandoned me here, 6 months pregnant, with nothing but a small water bottle. I reached for my phone in my pocket only to find it missing. A quick search of my other pocket confirmed my growing suspicion. Someone, likely Jessica, had removed it from my bag during breakfast or in the car. This wasn't an impulsive act. This was planned. The full implications hit me like a physical blow. My family had deliberately stranded me, their pregnant daughter, in the desert in June, without communication, without adequate water, without shelter from the sun already beating down mercilessly on my skin. What kind of people, what kind of family, does something like that? The dust from their departure had fully settled now, leaving no trace of their presence except tire tracks and a pregnant woman abandoned in the scorching desert. The reality of my situation crashed down upon me like a physical weight. Alone. 6 months pregnant. Miles from any road or habitation. In the Sonoran Desert. In June. With a single bottle of water. I sank to my knees, dust clouding around me, and screamed until my throat burned. Rage, betrayal, and fear coursed through me in overwhelming waves. How could they do this? What kind of twisted minds would endanger not only me, but my unborn child? A flutter of movement in my belly centered me momentarily, my baby responding perhaps to my spike in heart rate and stress hormones. Instinctively, my hands cradled my swollen abdomen. "It's okay," I whispered, though nothing was okay. "We're going to get through this." My initial shock gave way to a survival assessment. The water bottle they'd left me was a standard 16-ounce size, barely enough for an hour in this heat, let alone the few hours my mother had mentioned. The sun was climbing higher, intensifying the already brutal temperature. I had no hat, no sunscreen, wearing only a light maternity dress and sandals. Resort wear, not wilderness gear. The first rule of desert survival flashed through my mind from the many outdoor photography expeditions I'd been on: find shade. Standing exposed in direct sunlight would accelerate dehydration and increase the risk of heat stroke. I scanned the horizon, fighting rising panic. About a quarter-mile away, a rock formation jutted from the desert floor, offering potential shade. Moving slowly to conserve energy and water, I made my way toward it, each step deliberate in the loose, rocky soil. The short walk left me breathless and lightheaded. Pregnancy already taxed my body. The extreme conditions magnified every difficulty. Reaching the rocks, I found a shallow overhang creating a sliver of shade. It wasn't much, but it was something. I eased myself down, leaning against the coolest part of the stone. Taking the smallest possible sip of water, I tried to think clearly. From my position, I could still see the dirt road my family had driven down. Logic said to stay put. They claimed they would return. but a growing part of me questioned whether I could trust anything they said after what they'd done. As the morning stretched into early afternoon, the heat intensified to an almost hallucinatory level. The air shimmered, rocks baked, and even the cacti seemed to wilt. I rationed tiny sips of water, fighting the urge to gulp it down. Each time I checked, the level in the bottle decreased at an alarming rate. Twice I thought I heard vehicles in the distance, sending surges of hope through me. Both times proved to be nothing. Perhaps the wind, perhaps my desperate imagination. The second false alarm broke something inside me. Hot tears tracked down my cheeks, evaporating almost instantly in the dry air. My photography work had taught me about desert survival, but always from the perspective of someone fully prepared with proper gear. Now those lessons seemed like cruel ironies. I knew there was water in barrel cacti, but had no way to access it. I knew about desert edibles, but recognized nothing safe nearby. I knew to create signals for aircraft, but had no materials. As afternoon wore on, the first physical warning signs appeared. Dizziness when I changed position, a pounding headache, nausea rolling through my stomach, fatigue weighing my limbs. My lips cracked painfully and my tongue felt swollen. Classic dehydration symptoms, dangerous for anyone, potentially catastrophic for a pregnant woman. More worrying still, I began feeling unusual tightness in my abdomen. Not quite contractions, but concerning nonetheless. Premature labor induced by dehydration and stress was a real possibility. Stay calm for the baby became my mantra, though calm was increasingly difficult to maintain. With the water bottle now down to its last few sips, I made a decision. I could no longer assume my family would return. Their intervention had crossed into something much darker, and my survival instinct told me to act rather than wait passively for rescue or return. The road they'd driven in on must lead somewhere. I would follow it once the worst of the day's heat passed, moving during the marginally cooler evening hours. Until then, I would conserve energy and the last drops of water. As the sun finally began its descent toward the horizon, I prepared to move. Standing made my vision swim momentarily. Not a good sign. I finished the last of my water, knowing I would need every bit of strength for the journey ahead. Just as I was about to leave my rocky shelter, I heard it, the unmistakable warning rattle of a rattlesnake. Freezing in place, I scanned the ground near my feet. There, coiled in the shadow of the rock, was a Mojave rattlesnake, one of the most venomous snakes in North America. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure the vibration would trigger the snake to strike. We stared at each other, neither moving, in a deadly standoff as the shadows lengthened around us. The sun dipped lower, painting the desert in oranges and reds that would have been beautiful under any other circumstance. I remained motionless, watching the snake, knowing that a bite out here would mean certain death for me and my baby. After what seemed like an eternity, the rattlesnake slowly uncoiled and slithered away, disappearing among the rocks. The encounter left me shaking, adrenaline coursing through my system. Night was approaching, bringing new dangers, dropping temperatures, nocturnal predators, and the very real possibility of becoming disoriented in the darkness. Yet, I had to move. With the sun setting behind me, I began walking along the dirt track, using the last light to guide my way. As darkness fell completely, the desert transformed. The heat that had threatened to bake me alive gave way to a chill that cut through my light dress. Stars appeared in breathtaking numbers, the Milky Way a bright smear across the black sky. Under different circumstances, I might have marveled at the view. The dirt road was barely visible in the starlight, but I kept moving, one foot in front of the other. Each step was a victory. Each yard gained a triumph of will. I talked continuously to my baby, promising safety, apologizing for the situation, describing the stars overhead, anything to maintain a connection and keep my own spirits up. After walking for what might have been 2 hours, my foot caught on a rock, sending me stumbling forward. I managed to catch myself before falling completely, but the near miss made me realize how dangerous continuing in the dark could be. A fall could trigger premature labor, or worse. Finding a relatively flat area away from obvious animal burrows or cacti, I settled in for the night. The desert cold seeped into my bones as I curled around my pregnant belly, trying to conserve body heat. Sleep came in fitful bursts, interrupted by discomfort, fear, and the distant howling of coyotes. Sometime during the night, I felt the first real contraction, a band of pain tightening across my abdomen. Terror shot through me. Not here, not now, not alone in the desert. Please, I whispered to whoever might be listening. My unborn child, the desert spirits, the uncaring stars. Please hold on. Just a little longer. The contraction passed, not returning immediately. A warning perhaps, but not yet labor. I placed both hands on my belly, feeling the solid roundness that contained my child. We're survivors, you and I murmured. Jackson's waiting for us. We're going to make it home. As I drifted into uneasy sleep, I pictured Jackson realizing something was wrong when I didn't return, imagined him organizing a search. In my dreams, rescue came easily. Reality, I knew, would be much harder. Dawn broke with cruel brightness, waking me to a new day of survival in the desert. My body ached everywhere, my mouth felt like sandpaper, and my head pounded with dehydration. But I was alive, and I had not yet given birth in the wilderness. Small victories. The morning revealed I had made less progress than I thought. The dirt road stretched ahead, seemingly endlessly, with no sign of civilization. Behind me lay the path back to where my family had abandoned me, a direction I refused to consider. With the rising sun came rising heat, promising another day of brutal conditions. I knew I needed to find water soon, or neither my baby nor I would survive another full day. That's when I spotted it in the distance, a small structure of some kind. Hope surged through me, giving me strength to continue forward despite my body's protests. As I drew nearer, I could make out an abandoned ranger station, a small weathered building that had clearly not been used in years. But a ranger station meant the possibility of water supplies, maybe even a radio. My pace quickened despite the danger of overexertion. The station represented more than just potential resources. It represented hope in a situation that had been steadily draining it away. The abandoned ranger station stood like a mirage in the desert landscape. Weathered wood, bleached almost white by years of sun exposure, windows boarded up a sagging porch that had once provided welcome shade for visitors. Despite its dilapidated state, it was the most beautiful sight I had seen since being abandoned. I stumbled the last few yards, fighting lightheadedness and the sensation of my pregnant body working against me. The 3 wooden steps to the porch creaked ominously under my weight. The door hung partially open, its lock long since broken or removed. I pushed it further, revealing the dusty interior. The station consisted of a single room with what must have once been an information desk, some empty shelves, and a topographical map of the area still clinging to one wall. A metal filing cabinet stood open, its drawers empty, save for some ancient paperwork yellowed by time. In one corner sat the object of my desperate hope, a radio setup ancient and covered in dust. Water was my first priority. I searched frantically through the building, finally discovering a small bathroom with a sink. When I turned the handle, nothing happened. Of course, the water had been shut off years ago. Tears of frustration welled in my eyes. Then I noticed something outside the small bathroom window, a rain barrel positioned to catch water from the station's gutters. It was a long shot in this dry climate, but worth investigating. The barrel was mostly empty, but at the bottom, perhaps an inch of stagnant water remained. It would be full of bacteria, possibly dangerous, but dehydration would kill me faster. I found an old metal cup in one of the desk drawers, wiped it as clean as possible with the hem of my dress, and dipped it into the barrel. The water was warm and had an unpleasant taste, but I forced myself to sip it slowly, knowing that drinking too quickly would likely make me sick. After allowing some time to see if my body rejected it, I took a few more small sips. It wasn't enough to fully rehydrate me, but it might buy me a few more hours of survival time. With my most immediate needs somewhat addressed, I turned my attention to the radio. The equipment was decades old, the kind with dials and switches rather than digital displays. I tried the power switch without much hope, and sure enough, nothing happened. No lights, no static, no sign of life. I traced the power cord to where it disappeared into the wall, following it to what looked like an ancient backup battery system. The batteries had long since corroded, rendering the entire setup useless. Another hope dashed. The disappointment was crushing. I slumped onto the dusty floor, leaning against the wall, feeling utterly defeated. Hours had passed since my abandonment. Had Jackson realized something was wrong yet? Was anyone looking for me? As the sun climbed higher, the temperature inside the station rose to unbearable levels. Even in shade, the heat was oppressive, stealing what little energy I had managed to recover from my meager water find. I felt another contraction stronger than the night before. Panic shot through me. I couldn't have my baby here alone in an abandoned building in the middle of nowhere. I placed both hands on my belly, breathing deeply, willing my body to calm down to hold on. "Not yet," I whispered. "Please, not yet." The contraction eased but left me shaking. I needed to do something, anything, rather than wait passively for either rescue or disaster. Moving to the desk, I found a pencil stub and took some of the yellowed papers from the filing cabinet. In large letters, I wrote, "Pregnant woman stranded, need medical help. Sienna Palmer. Please contact Jackson Martinez, 505-555-7823. I included the date and time, then placed the note prominently on the desk. If anyone happened to check on this abandoned station, they would find my message. A slim hope, but better than nothing. Looking at the topographical map on the wall more carefully now, I tried to orient myself. If the station was marked, and I found it was with a small symbol, then I could estimate how far I was from any main roads or populated areas. The map confirmed my fears. The nearest highway was at least 15 miles away, an impossible distance in my condition without water or supplies. The ranger station was on an old service road that apparently connected eventually to a more traveled route, but even that was several miles distant. As afternoon approached, I made a decision. The station provided shade but little else. I had found a little water, left a note, and rested as much as possible. Staying longer offered no additional benefits while attempting to continue might at least give me a chance of flagging down a passing vehicle on a more traveled road. Before leaving, I tore another sheet of paper and left a second note, this time at the entrance. Sienna Palmer pregnant and stranded, continuing east on service road, need urgent medical help, please search. The sun was beginning its descent as I set out again, offering marginally less punishing conditions. I had filled the metal cup with the remaining water from the rain barrel, sipping it sparingly as I walked. Each step was an act of will, my body screaming for rest, for proper hydration, for an end to this nightmare. The dirt road seemed to stretch endlessly before me, disappearing into heat mirages that cruelly resembled water. My mind began playing tricks, showing me cars that weren't there, hearing voices carried on the wind. I recognized these as symptoms of severe dehydration and heat exposure, but knowledge did little to combat the hallucinations. As evening approached, bringing the brief desert twilight, I heard something that I first dismissed as another auditory hallucination, the sound of an animal moving through brush nearby. But this sound persisted, growing louder. I stopped peering into the gathering darkness. There, perhaps 20 yards away, stood a coyote watching me with intelligent eyes. Then another appeared beside it, and a third. My heart raced. Coyotes rarely attacked humans, but in my weakened, pregnant state, I presented an unusual situation. I looked around frantically for anything I could use as a weapon or shield, finding only a dead branch that had fallen from one of the few desert trees. Grabbing the branch, I made myself as large as possible, waving the stick and shouting hoarsely. The effort cost precious energy, but seemed to give the coyotes pause. After what seemed an eternity, they slunk away, disappearing into the desert scrub, though I sensed they hadn't gone far. Night fell completely, bringing the now familiar cold. I continued walking, using the stars to maintain my direction, though each step became increasingly uncertain. My thoughts grew jumbled, the line between reality and hallucination blurring. It was during this confused state that I stumbled upon a miracle. A natural rock depression filled with perhaps a gallon of relatively fresh rainwater, protected from evaporation by an overhanging ledge. The recent monsoon season, though sparse this year, had left this gift in the wilderness. I dropped to my knees beside this natural basin, fighting the urge to plunge my face into it and drink greedily. Instead, I used the cup to drink slowly, methodically, allowing my body to absorb the precious moisture without shocking my system. The water revival was short-lived. As I knelt there, another contraction seized me, stronger than any before. This one didn't pass quickly, building to a frightening intensity before finally easing. I remained on all fours, panting, tears streaming down my face. "Jackson," I whispered, as if saying his name could somehow summon him to me. I need you. I thought of his gentle strength, his unwavering support, the way he looked at me with such love. I recalled his voice telling me stories of desert survivors, of people who endured against impossible odds. The human spirit is as tough as the desert plants, he once told me, resilient beyond what seems possible. With that memory burning in my mind, I forced myself up and onward now, carrying the cup of water from the rock basin. The contractions continued through the night, irregular but intensifying as I walked, rested, and walked again. Dawn of the third day found me in a dangerous state. My skin had stopped sweating, a critical warning sign of severe dehydration. My vision blurred periodically. The contractions came every 30 minutes or so. My lips were cracked and bleeding. Each breath felt like inhaling fire. With the water from the rock basin now gone and no further sources in sight, I knew I had reached my limit. The road I'd been following seemed no closer to civilization than when I started. In a moment of clarity, I realized I needed to make myself as visible as possible to any potential aircraft that might be searching the area. Using the last of my strength, I gathered rocks and began arranging them in the open desert floor. Slowly, painfully, I created a massive SOS sign large enough to be visible from the air. Each rock placed cost me dearly in energy and pain, but I continued, driven by maternal instinct to save not just myself, but the innocent life within me. When the sign was complete, I collapsed beside it, no longer able to continue walking. The morning sun beat down mercilessly as I drifted in and out of consciousness. In my lucid moments, I spoke to my baby, apologizing for failing, for not being able to save us both. Your father will never stop looking for us, I promised, my voice a raspy whisper. He's the best man I've ever known. He would have loved you so much. As consciousness slipped away, my last thoughts were not of anger toward my family who had done this to me, but of love for the baby I had tried so desperately to protect, and the man who had shown me what real family should be. I didn't hear the approaching footsteps, didn't feel the gentle hands lifting my head, didn't register the voice calling for help on a satellite phone. Darkness had finally claimed me completely. Consciousness returned in fragments. Rhythmic beeping, the cool rush of air conditioning, the pinch of an IV needle in my arm. Voices professional and urgent discussing fluid levels, fetal heartbeat emergency measures. I opened my eyes to blinding fluorescent lights and the blur of medical personnel moving around me. A hospital. Somehow, impossibly, I was in a hospital. She's conscious, someone said. Sienna. Can you hear me? I'm Dr. Alvarez. A face came into focus. A woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a determined expression. My baby. I managed to croak, my throat raw from dehydration. Your baby has a strong heartbeat, she assured me. We're doing everything we can for both of you. You're severely dehydrated and suffering from heat exposure, but you made it here in time. Here. Where was here? How had I gotten from the desert floor to this emergency room? As if reading my thoughts, Dr. Alvarez continued. A hiker found you unconscious this morning. Thomas Reynolds. He's a geology professor who was doing field research. He called for an emergency airlift. You're at Tucson Medical Center now. Thomas Reynolds. The name meant nothing to me, yet I owed this stranger everything. Jackson, I whispered. My fiancé. The police are trying to contact him now, a nurse assured me. Just rest. Your body has been through extreme trauma. Rest seemed impossible with the chaos of medical interventions surrounding me, but my body had other ideas. Exhaustion pulled me back under despite my efforts to stay awake. When I next regained consciousness, the room was quieter. The beeping continued, but the frantic energy had subsided. A new IV bag dripped steadily into my arm. My hand rested on my still pregnant belly, the most reassuring feeling in the world. Sienna. The voice jolted me fully awake. Jackson stood in the doorway, his face a mask of anguish and relief. In 3 quick strides, he was at my bedside, taking my hand carefully around the IV tears streaming unashamedly down his face. I thought I'd lost you both, he said, his voice breaking. How did you know? I asked, my own voice stronger now after hours of fluids. When you didn't come back to the resort, I called your parents' room. They said you'd decided to stay out taking photos and would be back later. His expression darkened. But when night came and you still weren't back, I knew something was wrong. You would never stay out that late without contacting me, especially being pregnant. He brushed hair gently from my forehead, continuing, I called the police, but they said adults can go missing for 24 hours before it's considered serious. I started searching myself, driving to all your favorite photography spots. By morning, I had half the environmental department and 3 photography groups out looking too. The loyalty of friends and colleagues versus the cruelty of blood relatives. The contrast was stark and painful. Then the news broke, Jackson said. A pregnant woman found abandoned in the desert, rescued by a hiker. When they showed your photo, his voice failed him momentarily. I've never driven so fast in my life. Before I could respond, a police officer appeared in the doorway, a serious-looking woman in uniform who introduced herself as Detective Sandoval. Ms. Palmer, I'm glad to see you're awake. I have some questions about how you came to be stranded in the desert, if you feel up to answering. Jackson moved as if to object to give me more time, but I squeezed his hand. It's okay. I want to tell her. Over the next half hour, I recounted everything. The family visit, the drive into the desert, Jessica's taunting words, the deliberate abandonment of a pregnant woman in one of the most hostile environments on Earth. The detective took detailed notes, her expression growing increasingly grim. We've obtained security footage from the resort showing you leaving with your family in their vehicle, she confirmed. And we have satellite imagery of a vehicle matching the description returning to the resort without you 3 occupants visible. This is a very serious matter. Endangerment of both you and your unborn child, abandonment in life-threatening conditions. These are felony charges. The reality of what my family had done was now being translated into legal terms, making it somehow both more concrete and more unbelievable. Where are they now? I asked. Still at the resort as far as we know. They checked in for a week according to the front desk. We'll be bringing them in for questioning immediately. A nurse entered, checking the monitors and my vital signs. Your baby's heart rate has stabilized nicely, she told me with a reassuring smile. But you're still at risk for premature labor after what you've been through. We need to keep you here for observation. After she and the detective left, Jackson pulled a chair close to my bed, maintaining his gentle hold on my hand. The doctor said if you'd been out there just a few more hours. He couldn't finish the sentence. Thomas Reynolds, I said. The hiker who found me. I need to thank him. He's been interviewed for every local news channel, Jackson told me. The story's gone national. Sienna. Pregnant woman abandoned in desert by own family. It's everywhere. As if on cue, a television mounted in the corner of the room was showing footage of my rescue. A news anchor's voice narrated over aerial shots of a helicopter lifting a stretcher from the desert floor. In a shocking case of family betrayal, 29-year-old wildlife photographer Sienna Palmer was abandoned in the Sonoran Desert by her parents and sister while 6 months pregnant. Palmer was discovered by geology professor Thomas Reynolds, who spotted her SOS sign made of rocks while conducting field research. The footage cut to Thomas Reynolds, a bearded man in his early 40s with kind eyes, speaking to a reporter. I almost missed her. The rock arrangement caught my eye, and when I investigated, I found her unconscious, but still breathing. No one should have survived 3 days in these conditions, especially not someone in her condition. It's nothing short of miraculous. The anchor continued. Security footage from the resort where Palmer's family was staying confirms they left together in this vehicle but returned without her. Police are investigating charges of attempted murder and fetal endangerment. The scene shifted to the resort where police vehicles were visible outside. The family members, identified as Richard and Diana Palmer, and their younger daughter Jessica Palmer, have been taken in for questioning. Sources close to the investigation report, they claimed it was an intervention to address family concerns about Ms. Palmer's pregnancy and choice of partner. I turned away from the screen, unable to watch more. The public exposure of my family's cruelty brought a complicated mix of vindication and shame. These people, my flesh and blood, had left me to die, and now the whole world knew. What kind of people would leave their pregnant daughter in the desert? Jackson whispered, echoing my own thoughts. Before I could answer, Dr. Alvarez returned with an ultrasound machine. "Let's check on your little one properly," she said. The cool gel on my abdomen was followed by the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. My baby's heartbeat strong and regular. The image on the screen showed tiny hands a profile the curve of a spine. My miracle, my survivor. "Despite everything, your baby appears to be doing remarkably well," Dr. Alvarez said. "However, we're still concerned about premature labor. The contractions you experienced were real, triggered by dehydration and stress. We'll be monitoring you very closely for the next several days." As she finished the examination, a commotion erupted in the hallway. Raised voices, the sound of hospital security responding to some disturbance. "That's my daughter in there. I have a right to see her." My father's voice, unmistakable in its commanding tone, sent ice through my veins. Jackson stood, positioning himself protectively between me and the door. Detective Sandoval's voice cut through the chaos. "Mr. Palmer, you are not permitted contact with the victim. If you don't leave immediately, you'll be arrested for violating the emergency protection order." "Victim. She's my daughter. This is a family matter that's been blown completely out of proportion." I could hear my mother's softer voice trying to calm my father and Jessica, saying something about a misunderstanding. Their audacity was breathtaking, to show up at the hospital after what they had done to try to minimize their actions as a family matter. Dr. Alvarez quickly closed the door to my room, instructing a nurse to call for additional security. "You don't need this stress right now," she told me firmly. "I'll make sure they don't get anywhere near you." The confrontation in the hallway continued briefly before I heard the unmistakable sound of handcuffs and my father being read his rights for violating the protection order. The voices receded as he was led away. Jackson returned to my side, his face tight with barely controlled rage. "If I ever get my hands on them," he began. "No," I said, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice. "They're not worth it. Not worth you getting into trouble. We have something more important to focus on now." I placed his hand on my belly just as our baby kicked. A strong, healthy movement that brought tears to both our eyes. "This is our family now," I told him. "This is what matters." As the day progressed into evening, my condition stabilized further. The news cycle continued its coverage of the desert abandonment story, with new details emerging hourly. Security footage from the resort showed Jessica removing my phone from my purse during breakfast. Statements from resort staff confirmed my family's return without me, with my father telling the valet they'd dropped Sienna at a photography location. My mother was caught on camera saying they would pick her up later when a housekeeper inquired about my absence. The evidence mounted undeniable and damning. Social media erupted with outrage support messages flooding in from strangers around the country. My professional contacts in the photography and environmental communities organized a fund for medical expenses and baby needs. Through it all, Jackson never left my side, except briefly when Thomas Reynolds came to visit. My rescuer was humble about his role, brushing aside my tearful thanks. "Anyone would have done the same," he insisted. "I'm just glad I was there. My daughter's expecting her first child next month. When I saw you there pregnant and in trouble." He shook his head, emotion overcoming him momentarily. "No decent human being could have done anything else." Those words, "decent human being," hung in the air long after he left, a stark contrast to the people who shared my DNA but had proven themselves anything but decent. As night fell, Jackson finally agreed to go home for a shower and change of clothes, promising to return before morning. Alone for the first time since my rescue, I watched the muted television in my room showing footage of my parents and sister being led into the police station, their faces finally showing something approaching appropriate emotion, shock perhaps at the consequences of their actions. The reporter's voice was silenced by the mute button, but the scrolling caption told the story. "Family claims desert abandonment was misguided attempt at intervention. Bail hearing set for tomorrow." I turned off the television, placing both hands on my belly, feeling the gentle movements of my child. "It's just us now," I whispered. "But that's okay. We have Jackson. We have friends. We have people who actually know what love means. And that's more than enough." The next week passed in a blur of medical monitoring, police interviews, and legal consultations. My physical recovery progressed well. The IV fluids, careful monitoring, and bed rest allowed my body to recuperate from its ordeal. More importantly, the premature labor risk decreased as each day passed without contractions. My emotional state, however, fluctuated wildly. Nightmares plagued my sleep, dreams of endless desert of thirst so intense I could feel it even while unconscious of giving birth alone among the cacti with coyotes circling. I would wake gasping, clutching my belly, only Jackson's immediate presence providing any comfort. Detective Sandoval became a regular visitor, updating me on the legal proceedings. My parents and sister remained in custody, denied bail due to the severity of the charges and what the judge called an unconscionable lack of remorse. They're still claiming it was an intervention, the detective told me, barely concealing her disgust. That they intended to return for you but got delayed by car trouble. Car trouble for 3 days? Jackson asked incredulously. While their pregnant daughter was in the desert, and they didn't call for help. Their story has more holes than a sieve, Sandoval agreed. The district attorney is pursuing maximum charges: attempted murder, fetal endangerment, kidnapping, and abandonment. They're looking at significant prison time. The thought of my family in prison brought complicated emotions. Despite everything, these were the people who had raised me, whose blood ran in my veins. Yet they had demonstrated with brutal clarity that shared genetics meant nothing compared to true love and decency. Do I need to testify? I asked, dreading the thought of facing them in court. Eventually, yes, but not for months. The preliminary hearings won't require your presence, and by the time the actual trial begins, you'll have had your baby and had time to recover further. The media attention continued unabated. News vans remained parked outside the hospital, reporters hoping for interviews or at least footage of visitors entering my room. I declined all requests, valuing privacy over the chance to tell my story publicly. One unexpected development was the outreach from estranged members of my extended family. My mother's sister, Aunt Catherine, whom I hadn't seen since childhood due to some long-standing family feud, called the hospital in tears. I always knew my sister had issues, she told me when I accepted her call. But this is beyond anything I could have imagined. I should have stayed in touch with you, Sienna. Maybe if you'd had other family to turn to. You can't blame yourself, I assured her. No one could have predicted this. I'd like to meet you, she said hesitantly, and your fiancé, to offer whatever support I can. Her sincerity seemed genuine, and when she visited 2 days later, the family resemblance was striking. She had my mother's features, but with warmth where my mother's face had always held judgment. She brought baby clothes she had handmade and tears when she felt the baby kick. This child will be loved, she promised. Not the way Diana tried to love, with conditions and expectations, but properly wholly for exactly who they are. On my 5th day in the hospital, my doctor delivered welcome news. You're stable enough to go home, she said, but I want strict bed rest for at least another week, and you'll need to come in for regular monitoring until delivery. The prospect of returning to our apartment, our safe space, our true home, filled me with longing. But the logistics presented problems. The media is still camped outside, Jackson pointed out. And if your family posted bail? They haven't, Detective Sandoval assured us, having arrived for her daily update. And I've arranged for a police escort to get you home safely. We can bring you in through the underground parking entrance and up the service elevator. The next morning, I was wheeled out of the hospital through a service corridor, transferred to an unmarked police vehicle with tinted windows, and driven home with a police escort. The subterfuge worked. No reporters followed, and we made it to our apartment building undetected. Being home brought immediate comfort. Our small space was filled with plants, photographs, books, all the things that represented our shared life and values. Jackson had prepared for my arrival, setting up our bedroom with extra pillows, a mini fridge stocked with healthy snacks and drinks, and a stack of baby books we had been meaning to read. The following days established a new routine. Jackson worked remotely to stay with me, leaving only for quick grocery runs. Friends visited, bearing meals and gifts. My editor from National Geographic sent flowers with a note promising a feature on desert conservation whenever I felt ready to work again. Detective Sandoval called with daily updates rather than visiting, respecting our need for privacy and normalcy. It was during this relative calm that Jackson officially proposed again, not with the rushed intensity of our first engagement after discovering the pregnancy, but with thoughtful intention. Kneeling beside our bed, he presented not a diamond, but a simple band of silver inlaid with turquoise. "I almost lost you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't want to wait any longer to make you my wife. Not a big ceremony, not right now. Just us making promises to each other and this baby. The rest can wait until you're ready." 2 weeks after my rescue, with my condition fully stabilized, we were married in our living room. The judge who performed the ceremony was a friend of Thomas Reynolds, who stood as our witness along with Aunt Catherine. My pregnancy bump was prominently displayed in a simple white dress as we exchanged vows that felt all the more profound after coming so close to losing everything. That same day, I received notification that my parents and Jessica had been indicted on all charges. Their defense strategy had shifted from claiming intervention to suggesting temporary insanity brought on by family stress, a claim the prosecution dismissed as absurd. More surprising was the letter that arrived from Jessica, passed along by her attorney after being screened by mine. I hesitated to open it, unsure if I could bear whatever justification or excuse it might contain. Jackson offered to read it first, but ultimately this was something I needed to face myself. The letter was unexpectedly raw, tear-stained in places, the handwriting unsteady. "Sienna, there is no excuse for what I did, for what I helped them do to you. I can't ask for forgiveness because I don't deserve it. But I need you to know the truth. I've been jealous of you my entire life. You had the courage to defy them, to create your own path. I followed every rule, met every expectation, and all it did was hollow me out. When you found happiness, real happiness with Jackson and your career, it made me hate you because it showed what a coward I've been. When you announced your pregnancy, something broke in me. Mom and Dad were raging about it, and I fueled their anger. The desert idea was mine. I convinced them it would shock you to your senses. I never thought about the real danger, never considered the baby. I just wanted to hurt you for having what I couldn't. Watching the news, seeing what we actually did to you, I can't sleep. I can't eat. The person I've become terrifies me. I'm pleading guilty to all charges. No deals, no reduced sentence. I want the punishment. Maybe somewhere in paying for what I've done, I'll find a way to live with myself. Your sister who failed you in every possible way. Jessica." I read the letter twice before passing it wordlessly to Jackson. His face darkened as he read, but he said nothing, simply holding me as I processed this confession. "Do you think she's sincere?" he finally asked. "Yes," I said after consideration. "She's broken, but this feels like truth, not manipulation." "Does it change anything?" I placed a hand on my belly, feeling our child move within me. "Not right now. Maybe someday, but not now. Right now, this is all that matters." As my due date approached, life settled into something resembling normalcy, though forever altered by what had happened. The media attention gradually subsided as newer stories captured public interest, though occasional reporters still called seeking interviews or book deals. The trial date was set for 6 months after my due date, giving me time to recover from childbirth before facing the ordeal of testifying. My parents maintained their not guilty pleas, while Jessica, true to her letter, confessed to everything, accepting the full weight of the charges against her. 3 months after the desert ordeal, despite all medical predictions that the trauma might cause premature delivery, I gave birth right on schedule to a healthy baby girl. We named her Luna, for the moon that had provided light during my darkest night in the desert, and for the new light she brought into our lives. In the hospital, holding our daughter with Jackson beside me, the contrast between this birth and what might have happened in the desert was almost too much to comprehend. Here was every modern medical comfort, expert care, and above all love, surrounding this new life. The desert nightmare had ended in this moment of pure joy. "She has your eyes," Jackson whispered, tracing a gentle finger along Luna's cheek. "And your determination," I replied, watching our daughter's tiny fists punch the air with surprising strength. 2 weeks after Luna's birth, my parents' attorney contacted mine with a request. They wanted to see their granddaughter. The request was promptly denied, with my attorney making it abundantly clear that no contact would be permitted now or in the future. Jessica's request, however, was different. She asked not to see the baby, but for a single photograph, to know that the life I almost destroyed is thriving. After much consideration, I sent a picture of Luna's hand gripping my finger, enough to grant the request without exposing my daughter's face to someone who had proven herself dangerous. The response came through her attorney. Jessica had wept upon seeing the photo and had it framed in her cell. She was participating in intensive therapy and had started working with a prison program for pregnant inmates, trying to make some small amends through helping others in vulnerable positions. As Luna grew and thrived, I slowly returned to work, initially with small local assignments that allowed me to keep her with me. Jackson proved an incredible father, his natural gentleness perfectly suited to parenting. Our tiny family unit was tight-knit and loving, everything a family should be. 1 year after the desert abandonment, I held my first photography exhibition titled Survival. The centerpiece was a self-portrait taken in the desert, my pregnant silhouette against the setting sun, my shadow stretching long across the sand. I had returned to the desert on my own terms, no longer its victim, but its interpreter, reclaiming the landscape that had nearly claimed me. The exhibition opening coincided with my parents' and Jessica's sentencing. My parents received 15 years each, while Jessica's guilty plea and evident remorse reduced her sentence to 8 years. The legal chapter was closing, allowing us to truly move forward. Aunt Catherine became a regular presence in our lives, a bridge to family history without the toxicity of my parents. Through her, I learned family stories I had never heard, saw photos of grandparents I barely remembered, and began to understand the generational dysfunction that had shaped my parents into the people they became. Understanding isn't excusing, she reminded me when I found myself feeling momentary sympathy for my mother's difficult childhood. They made their choices. You're making better ones for Luna. As Luna's first birthday approached, I received another letter from Jessica. Unlike the first, this one came after months of therapy and reflection. Dear Sienna, I don't expect you to read this, and I understand if you throw it away unread. I just need to put these words somewhere. I've been sober for 10 months now. I never told you about my drinking problem, another secret in our family of secrets. The therapy here has helped me see how much of my jealousy and rage came from my own self-loathing, how I projected onto you all the things I hated about myself. There's a program here where we make toys for children in shelters. I find myself wondering if Luna likes stuffed animals or building blocks. Then I remember I have no right to know these things, that my actions cost me any place in her life. I hope someday, maybe years from now, you might consider allowing supervised contact. Not for my sake, but because having more people who love her can only be good for Luna. But I will respect whatever boundaries you set for as long as you set them. The woman who left you in the desert isn't who I am anymore, but I know that means nothing without years of proving it through actions, not words. I'm trying to become someone worthy of being your sister again, even if that never happens. With love and deepest regret, Jessica. This letter I shared with Jackson, asking his thoughts on the possibility of eventual highly restricted contact. It would need to be years from now, he said carefully. After she's served her time, after she's proven this change is real, and never unsupervised. I think I want to leave the door open a crack, I admitted. Not for my parents. What they did came from a place of control and cruelty. But Jessica, there's something in her letters that feels like genuine remorse, genuine change. It's your decision, he said. Whatever you choose, I'll support you. My response to Jessica was brief, but not unkind. I told her Luna was thriving, that supervised contact might be possible after her release if she maintained her recovery and therapy, but that this was not a promise, merely a possibility that would depend entirely on her actions over many years. As Luna's first birthday celebration approached, we planned a small gathering with close friends and Aunt Catherine. The desert ordeal had taught me the profound value of chosen family, the people who stand beside you not out of obligation or genetic connection, but out of genuine love and shared values. The night before the party, I stood in Luna's nursery watching her sleep peacefully in her crib. Her tiny chest rose and fell, her dark lashes resting against perfect cheeks, her small hands occasionally twitching as she dreamed baby dreams. Jackson came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist, his chin resting on my shoulder as we both gazed at our daughter. "What are you thinking?" he asked softly. "That everything that happened led to this moment," I replied. "That despite the horror of the desert, despite my family's betrayal, I wouldn't change anything if it meant not having exactly this life with you with her." We stood in silence for a long moment, watching our daughter sleep, feeling the profound rightness of our little family. "The desert tried to take everything from me," I whispered. "Instead, it gave me the strength to build something better than what I lost." Luna stirred in her sleep, a small smile crossing her face as if she agreed with my assessment. In that peaceful nursery surrounded by love instead of danger, I finally felt completely free of the desert's hold. The abandonment that was meant to break me had instead revealed my true strength. The family that had rejected me had been replaced by one built on love rather than obligation. And the child that might have died before drawing breath was now thriving, bringing joy to everyone who knew her. Some deserts, I had learned, we walk through literally, others we navigate emotionally. But with the right companions and enough inner strength, we can find unexpected oases in even the harshest landscapes of our lives. Has anyone else experienced family betrayal that ultimately led to something better? Share your stories in the comments. If this story touched you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that survival is possible even in life's harshest deserts. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that sometimes our greatest strength emerges from our most vulnerable moments.